Your Excellency, Governor Baker, Professor Chalmers, the Very Reverend Humphrey, the Honourable Chief Justice Blow, thank you for your kind invitation to be here, and distinguished members of the clergy, and the bar, and the bench, and the protective services, and friends and guests. It's been a little while since I practiced law. It's a few years back now, but I think of those years fondly, and when I am here with all of you, it makes me want to get back to it, perhaps one day. But there's a number of reasons why I'm really overjoyed to be here, not the least of which is because I'm a Sri Lankan Tamil Australian, and in my extended family, embarrassingly, the cultural stereotypes run pretty deep. I have a lot of cousins, and about 15 of them are doctors. And I'm the failure that bombed out and became a lawyer. And as if that wasn't bad enough, I then went on to work in politics. So I've been known for a long time in my family as the white sheep of the family. There's an old short story written by the great Russian writer Leo Tolstoy that not many people know about. It's called How Much Land Does a Man Need? And in it, Tolstoy chronicles the story of a Russian peasant farmer named Pakhom. And Pakhom, like so many of us, I dare say all of us in this cathedral, shares a lot of our desire for success, for status, for experience, for achievement. And he's a peasant, so how he does that is by farming. He has a small plot of land, he farms it, he does well. He borrows money, he buys some more land, he cultivates that, and he's slowly working his way up the line, achievement and acquisition of land. But like so many of us, it's not quite enough. He wants to get rich quick. He wants a big score. He wants his next day and his next year not just to be good, but to be great. He wants a great year ahead. And he finds out about a group of very wealthy landowners in another part of the country called the Bashkirs. And he knows two things about these Bashkirs: that they have a ton of beautifully arable land, and that they're not that bright, apparently. And so he thinks to himself, I'll go and cut myself a deal and buy a ton of their land for very little money. So he goes to meet with the chief of the Bashkirs. And the chief says, okay, Pakhom, here's the deal. Give us a nominal amount, say 1,000 rubles. And then tomorrow morning as the sun rises, you can choose any point on our land. And then for the entire day of sunlight, on foot, you get to traverse as much of our land as you can. And however much of a perimeter you enclose on foot in one day of sunlight, all of that land is yours for 1,000 rubles. The only catch is you've got to get back to your starting point before the sun sets. Otherwise you get nothing, and we get to keep your 1,000 rubles. So Pakhom is excited. He's calculating, he's thinking about how many acres and acres and hectares of land he can cover in one day. And so the next morning, he's up bright and early, all the townspeople are up, the rumours have spread about this deal, and he marks a spot on the Bashkirs' land, ready to make his one big, great score. Now, if you haven't read the story and you want to know what happens, you have to stay awake and stay with me for about another 18 minutes. But even in the setup, that story is relevant to all of us, not just those of us in the legal profession and the legal community, but to all of us. Because Pakhom's mindset and heart posture reflects a lot of what makes us tick as we head into a new year. He wanted a great day, he wanted a great score, he wanted a great year, and each of us sitting here today, no matter what part of this community you're a part of, or what you believe, or how you view the world, or how you think about success, we all want a great 2024. So the question that we all have to ask ourselves then is, at the opening of the legal year 2025, when we look back on the past year, this year that's in front of us now, what will have made it great? What will greatness for 2024 look like for each of us? Now, I don't have all the answers for that in the next 15 minutes, but I want to give you three first principles, three categories of questions that each of us can ask ourselves, regardless of why we're here or our roles going into this year, that we can ask ourselves to help inform what this year might be like for us. Firstly, the shape of our success. Secondly, the tone of our justice. And thirdly, the audacity of our sacrifice. The shape of our success, the tone of our justice, and the audacity of our sacrifice. So firstly, the shape of our success. What does success look like? It looks like, obviously, a number of different things to different people. But I would suggest there are a couple of deep cultural currents alive and kicking today in advanced, industrial, democratic, wealthy societies like ours. The first one I want to call optimization. There's an old sociologist called George Ritzer, and he coined the phrase McDonaldization. He used the fast food chain McDonald's as a metaphor to talk about and identify what we moderns are looking for every day in our models of success. And he broke it down to 4 things. We're all looking for efficiency, predictability, calculability, and control. Efficiency, predictability, calculability, and control. And certainly my time practicing law, just in civil litigation, in a national law firm, those things were all very much alive and kicking. I'm sure they're alive and kicking today in every part of the profession. We were trying to standardize our workflows. We broke down our time resources into 6-minute blocks. We were trying to customize our client experience. We were trying to consolidate systems and systematize whatever automation we could. We had templates for our pleadings and our interrogatories and our letters and our call to bank offers and our introductory offers. It was all an exercise in efficiency, predictability, calculability, and control. And it was good. It was a good thing. It was good for our clients, it was good for our team, and I'd like to think it was good for the administration of justice that we're all trying to strive towards. So that's optimization. And in that, not just in the law, but in every aspect of our lives, we've become creatures of optimization. We're looking for that same stuff: efficiency, predictability, calculability, and control in every aspect of life. So alongside this optimization, there's something else at play when we think about the shape of our success. And that's self-actualization. And again, that's been alive and kicking for many years. It's been talked about and written about differently, but it's the same old story. The early godfathers and godmothers of liberalism were on about it. People like Jean-Jacques Rousseau writing about self-creation and self-autonomy and freedom as the greatest virtue. Then more recent philosophers like Robert Bellah called it expressive individualism. The moral theorist Charles Taylor calls it the age of authenticity. Frank Sinatra summed it up pretty well, I thought. He just said, "I did it my way." That's the same stuff, self-actualization. It's that idea that we see in our social media hashtags and handles today that's summarized perhaps even better than Sinatra. You do you, your best self, your best life. And so we have these kind of twin towers of optimization, self-optimization and self-actualization that push us towards these shapes of success that generally revolve around our desire, things that we want for ourselves, and this idea of more of those things. And like I said, they're not intrinsically bad things. They're not even intrinsically problematic. But while they might not be incorrect, I suggest that they're probably incomplete. We have a lot of data out there in research that suggests that there needs to be more to the shape of our success than just optimizing and self-actualizing. We know that in wealthy OECD countries like ours, the greater the GDP per capita, the greater the need for mental health services and psychological services per square kilometre. We also know from the economic psychology that there's a very simple principle in play that we all see and experience in our lives called hedonic adaptation. I saw this very much in the legal profession when I was a part of it. I saw it in politics. I see it absolutely everywhere that I've worked and in all the communities I've been a part of. That it doesn't really matter how well we do, what promotions we get, how many cases we close or settle, how many things we get published, whatever appointments we get to whatever position. It's never quite enough. We're always looking for the next thing. As the LinkedIn mantra goes, after you get a new job, your first move should be to work out what needs to happen for you to get your boss's job. Just the next thing. And so we see that optimization and actualization, while they're great, and we in the legal community do them better than most, there has to be something else. Mark Twain said that the 2 most important days in a person's life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. The day you were born and the day you find out why. He's doing something pretty countercultural there. He's equating human success not with achievement and accumulation and status and experience, not with optimization and actualization. He's equating success and happiness with purpose. And he's not alone. The late Indian Nobel laureate for literature, Rabindranath Tagore, wrote famously about a violin string. He said, "In front of me I have this violin string, and it's free to move about and do whatever it wants. But it's not free to make music, not until I take it and fix it to my violin. And then it can fulfill the purpose for which it was made." And so I wonder whether, when we think about the shape of our success this year, it's worth thinking not just about what we achieve and what we get done and about our bottom lines and about our CVs, but about some kind of a higher purpose, that we can infuse into our shapes of success. Infusing purpose into the shape of our success. Secondly, the tone of our justice. Most of you will have heard of the gentleman named Sam Bankman-Fried. He was one of the world's most prominent cryptocurrency billionaires. He was the world's youngest billionaire at the age of 30, and he was talked about across the venture capital community and crypto community as probably being on his way to being the world's first trillionaire. All up until it all came crashing down last year. And he was charged, arrested, tried, and convicted of embezzling around $8 or $9 billion of his clients' money. In his biography, he's asked by his biographer, "What about ethics, Sam? Talk to me a bit about how you treat people, and more importantly, the basis on which you think people should be treated." It's an implicit question about justice. You know, what is owed to people? What's fair? And Sam Bankman-Fried very honestly and bluntly, but perhaps a bit jarringly, gave a very clear and straight answer. He said people should simply be treated based on the probability distributions of their expected future value. People should be treated based on the probability distributions of their expected future value. It jars, it sounds kind of not even immoral, it sounds amoral, and it's something that we all kind of smirk at, but certainly I'm guilty of treating people like that in the name of what I want. When we follow that kind of hard, pragmatic, utilitarian, outcomes-based approach, the reality is that people will start getting left behind. Our justice will suffer. The tone of our justice will suffer. Even if it's administered and carried out technically correctly, people will be left behind. And that's what was happening in the community that the Old Testament prophet Amos was writing about, that was read earlier today. He's writing about injustice. And he's not saying that justice is gone, he's saying something far more dangerous. He's saying, in this community where people have been living like Sam Bankman-Fried said we should live, he said, and he wrote all those thousands of years ago, your justice has turned bitter. The word that's used in the Hebrew is wormwood. He's effectively saying your justice and your cries for justice have turned to bitterness. That's interesting to me, largely from my time in politics, because I see it even now, that there's no shortage of people calling for justice out there. On every part of the political spectrum, from every religious and irreligious, political and apolitical worldview, people are screaming for justice. But those cries are increasingly bitter. They're grumpy, they're angry. They feel more retributive than they do restorative. And so I wonder why that is. Why is justice and our calls for justice getting more and more confused and more angry? Well, astonishingly and beautifully, Amos actually gives a diagnosis in the very next line. He says, your cries for justice have turned bitter, and you have thrown righteousness to the ground. That's his diagnosis. It's because we've thrown righteousness to the ground, that's why the cries for justice have turned bitter. Now, righteousness, I admit, is a very ugly word today. There's lots of connections with moral self-righteousness and soapboxes and a holier-than-thou kind of connotation. And terribly and ironically, it's those of us that call ourselves Christian that have perhaps been responsible largely for the problem that people have with the word righteousness. But I think a lot of us have got it wrong too, because when you look carefully at the Bible, the readings today and the Bible more broadly, and you read the word righteousness carefully in context, it's not a moral word. In the Bible at least, it's not about being morally right or wrong. It's about being relationally right or wrong. Righteousness, according to the Bible, is relational at first instance, not moral. We've kind of twisted it, but it's a relational word. It's about being in right relationship, as the prophets Amos and other prophets and biblical writers say. It's about being in right relationship with God and in right relationship with those around us. So righteousness for us this year looks like attending to the relationships, attending relationally in our administration of justice, to our colleagues, to those in our chambers, those on our benches, those in our firms, those in our study groups, those in our communities, our colleagues, our opponents, those that work with us, those that work for us, those that work against us, our clients, our stakeholders, and the community more generally, giving a bit of extra attention to relationship, infusing the tone of our justice with relationship, not simply with outcomes or following rules or following processes or ticking those boxes. That's part of it, of course it is. But perhaps attending to the relationality of our justice, adding relationality to the tone of our justice. Because when we fail to do that, when we throw relational righteousness to the ground, the tone of our justice does tend to suffer. So we've talked about adding some purpose to the shape of our success and adding some relationality to the tone of our justice. How does that come about? Thirdly and finally, the audacity of sacrifice. Now, I know it will surprise many of you to hear this, but when I was working in politics, I met some good people and learned a few things. And one of them was from a politician who told me that the most beautiful thing in all of team sports is the pass. Sounds a bit unconventional, sounds a bit kitsch actually, but it's countercultural because you'd think the most beautiful thing in team sports was the victory, the championship, the premiership, the celebrations, the camaraderie even. But if you break that down to its first principle, it is the pass. Because the pass reflects and captures the audacity and beauty and power of sacrifice. Passing to a teammate, giving of yourself for something beyond yourself, setting someone else up for success, sacrificing your glory and credit and esteem for the good of someone else and something else that's higher and above and beyond you. Now, there's lots of division and polarization out there in our community today and globally today. We see it in geopolitics, we see it in politics, we see it culturally, we see it on every issue under the sun. But one thing most people can agree on is the importance of love as the master ethic, the supreme ethic. People of all faiths and no faiths still kind of agree that love is important. We've been singing and dancing and writing about it for thousands of years, all the way from Shakespeare to Taylor Swift and beyond. Everyone's on about love and no one seems to argue. But interestingly, when we look carefully at how we've been singing and dancing and writing about love, it's really about love anchored in desire, affection. Love is a feeling that we project based on things that we feel affection for. And that's not a bad thing, but once again, while it's not incorrect, I would suggest that it's incomplete. Because when Jesus is given the opportunity to expound on this funny thing called love, he's very clear about what's at its heart, and he's very clear about the purest form of it. In another one of the readings we just heard, he says, "Greater love has no one than this, than someone lays down their life for their friends." And then astonishingly, just a few weeks later, it's exactly what he does on a cross. I want to put to you something audacious, that the legal community and the legal profession, our profession at its most beautiful, is anchored in the ideal, not the idea, the ideal of a group of people using their gifts, their resources, their time, their efforts, and their intellect to give of themselves to protect dignity at the personal level and to promote and maintain the cohesional functioning of community at the societal level. Our profession at its most beautiful is an act of sacrifice. But sacrifice is an audacious thing. It's not something that the cultural currents understand what to do with, let alone push us or nudge us towards. And it has to come from something beyond just looking for what we want and how we want things to go in the context of our striving for greatness and for a great year. So the sun's almost going down and Pacom is running and he's exhausted. And he looks at the sun about to set behind the horizon line and he doesn't think he's going to make it. And so he sprints with everything he's got. And Tolstoy writes it quite beautifully. He's literally racing against the shadow of the sun to secure this enormous chunk of land. And just microseconds before the sun dips behind the horizon, he falls onto his starting point and hits his mark. He's done it. Everyone's cheering. He's secured an enormous piece of land. But he's given so much of himself to it. He's so exhausted that he drops dead on the spot. And the final scene of the story is someone burying Pacom in a grave that's about 6 feet by 3 feet, thereby answering the question that gives the title of the story: how much land does a man need? We will all be called to do great things this year. And I know we will, you all will, do great things in whatever spheres of influence you have, with your expertise, with your opportunities, with your position. You'll all be called to do great and wonderful things. But there is something even better that we can all strive to infuse that greatness with something even more beautiful and transformative. If we're willing and able to give a little more attention to purpose in the shape of our success, and relationality in our pursuit of justice. And to do it all through that audacious thing called sacrifice. We can all have a year that's infused by something better than greatness, and that's goodness. My hope and prayer for all of you is that you will have a great year in 2024. But even more importantly, my hope and prayer is that it will be infused by that thing that is even more beautiful and transformative than greatness. That you will have a year that is filled with goodness. Thanks for listening. God bless you all.